Vishnu Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dishatarine Vanchakalpaturvyasya Kripa Sindhave Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. So I've been requested to talk about ladies because sometimes it appears quite one-sided. We hear about all what the men have done and their association and their service to Srila Prabhupada. But of course, 50% of our society is made up of ladies. And I'd like to first of all begin by briefly talking about my mother, because after all, my mother was the one who brought me into this world. And she had a wonderful experience with Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada came to visit Scotland in the early 1970s. Prabhupada was invited by Tribhuvanath Prabhu, who was the temple president at the time, to visit Edinburgh, and also he arranged a program for Srila Prabhupada in Glasgow at the same time that Prabhupada was up there. And Prabhupada also insisted that I should come along because, after all, I'm Scottish. So. And I didn't know that my parents were showing any interest in coming over. I had mentioned that I was coming to Scotland and that my spiritual master would also be in Edinburgh for a few days. But my parents made a concerted effort to come and visit, both of us, both Prabhupada and myself. And when my mother came, because my father actually changed his mind, he decided to stay in the car outside, and my mother went inside alone. And one of the Scottish lady devotees saw this elderly lady. She was about 61 at the time, and she explained who she was, that she had come to Forest Road to meet her son, and she'd remembered my devotee name as well as my Christian name. And this girl got really excited and she said, "Oh, you're the mother of Dhananjaya. Our spiritual master is with us at the moment. Would you like to come and meet him?" And she said, "Well, I don't want to put him out, if he's busy." Then she said, No. He's got time for everybody. Please come with me. Because at that time I was taking a shower. I didn't even know that my mother had shown up at the temple. And so this Scottish girl devotee led my mother to Prabhupada's room, and she knocked on the door, opened the door, paid her obeisances, and Prabhupada was sitting at the other side of the room, behind a big kitchen table with the legs sawn off to make it a low table, and he was sitting on a cushion. And so this girl, she announced, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, Dhananjaya's mother has just come." And she was standing next to her. And Prabhupada immediately stood up, walked across the room, and shook my mother by the hand and said to her, "Thank you so much for allowing your son to be a member of our society." And that impression lasted the rest of my mother's life, even up to her death. She always remembered that encounter with Srila Prabhupada and how he behaved as a perfect gentleman. And so I just thought I'd mention that. Because of course, not all of the devotees' parents were favorable. In fact, quite a number were unfavorable, not knowing exactly what the parents were getting into. But my mother, because she was quite pious, she had I invited her to Berry Place a couple of years before, and she came down with my brother and my sister, and they helped put together the canopy for Lord Jagannath's Rath cart. And they had stayed with Mukunda and Janaki. So already she had a very nice understanding of, we were very caring for each other, and we weren't just a cult and weirdos, but we're normal people. So I think that's important, that all the devotees should keep in touch with their family members, with their parents, if their mothers and fathers are still alive. Because after all, we owe a debt to our family for looking after us before we came into contact with Krishna consciousness. And of course, our spiritual lives are being taken care of by Srila Prabhupada and Prabhupada's followers. Then I'd like to switch to Mother Jamuna. I'd like to say a few things about her, because I have to say she made an incredibly important impression on my mind when I first started coming to the temple. This is in 1969. And I wasn't quite sure about the rules and regulations, because no one had said anything, but on my first visit, I brought a brown bag with 6 free-range hard-boiled eggs. So I was bringing a gift, and I thought this would be quite appropriate, not knowing the diet that the boys were following at that time. And it was Kulachikar, he introduced me to Jamuna, and this is just outside the kitchen. So I handed her this brown paper bag and I said, maybe you can use this for lunch. And first of all, she smiled like anything. She said, oh, that is, very thoughtful of you to come with some gift. But of course, when she looked inside the bag, she went, oh my goodness, there's a little problem here. I said, oh, why? And she said, because actually we don't eat eggs. In fact, she asked me, she said, do you know the sort of regular principles we follow? And I said, I don't have a clue. And she taught me those regular principles. And then she said, well, I can see you have an interest in cooking. Would you like to come to the kitchen and learn something, how we cook? And I said, oh, I'd be delighted. So she was so loving, such a loving mother, that she saw the positive side, that I was, trying to contribute something. She said, well, today we're going to be making eggplant balaram. Maharaj, you might know of eggplant balaram. Thick slices of eggplant coated in special spices, and then pan-fried in ghee. That was eggplant balaram. And I'd never eaten eggplant in my life. It's something that never came on the menu when I was at home. My parents never introduced me to that particular vegetable. And she said, oh, and also we're going to be making chapatis. You know what chapatis are? And I said, is that what you eat instead of bread? She said, yeah, I suppose you can say so. And she said, let me show you how to roll the chapatis, how to make them, and so on. So that very same day, she taught me how to make puffed up chapatis. She was expert. Of course, directly she learned from Srila Prabhupada. And the first time that Prabhupada instructed her to cook was at her sister's wedding, or for her sister's wedding, for Janaki's wedding in New York. And at that time, Jamuna was in the habit of smoking, and smoking cigarettes, that is. And so Prabhupada always gave her this instruction whenever she came, because not too many guests or friends or family members came to Mukunda's and Janaki's wedding. But Jamuna flew all the way from Oregon on the west coast of America to New York. And she knew some, obviously because of her Italian background, she had some experience in cooking pasta, especially spaghetti and so on. But that's not what Prabhupada wanted to cook. He had a whole menu written out, and Janaki said, my sister, she's quite good at cooking, and she's a quick learner, so maybe she can help you in the kitchen to cook. So the first instruction Prabhupada gave to Jamuna was, wash your hands. And so she went to wash her hands, and then she was waiting there, and Prabhupada was instructing her how to make different vegetable preparations, cutting vegetables and assisting her. And but then she felt inclined to take a little break and go outside and have a cigarette break. So she went out, had a cigarette, came back in, and the first thing Prabhupada says to her is, "Now wash your hands." And then again, that was all he said to her. He didn't say, this is not what you should be doing, but he was very magnanimous in the very beginning, in the 60s. Anyway, also Jamuna instructed me to wash my hands before I came into the kitchen. And then she said, "Oh, would you like to stay for lunch? We're going to be making other preparations besides the chapatis and the eggplant salad." And I said, "Well, if you have enough to spare, then I don't mind staying for lunch." And her sister, Janaki, came down and she started cooking with Jamuna, and she said, "Well, now you just stay in the prasadam room, we'll be there very shortly." And they prepared this amazing, what I thought was an amazing feast, but actually this is how they're eating practically every day. And then I thought, well, if this is how they're eating every day, maybe I should plan on staying for a really long time, not just a day or half a day or something. And so she really kept me under her wing. And when I finally moved into the temple, I got shaved up by Kulashikar, which is the only prerequisite for becoming a temple devotee, was to shave the head, shave the hair off the head. And so Jamuna would of course sing. She would sing for the evening arti. In those days, they were worshipping 3 sets of little Jagannath Subhadra Baladev deities that Malati had acquired from one of the Indian import shops in San Francisco. And they also had a big painting of Srila Prabhupada. But also, she had a little set of Radha Krishna deities. In fact, really this was her heart's desire, was to worship Radha Krishna. And in those days, whenever anything special happened, she would write to Srila Prabhupada. She would send him an aerogram, and Prabhupada would obviously respond by sending her an aerogram, because this is before there was GBC. This is before Prabhupada really had a secretary who would do his, correspondence. And she was explaining that she explained to us that the way these deities came was because one Brijbasi lady called Shamama, who had attended Rath Yatra, in fact, I saw them together under the Nelson's column in Trafalgar Square. They were both playing mridangas and both singing together, Shamama and Jamuna. And so Jamuna was really excited that these deities had come to her. And so she wrote to Prabhupada and said, "Oh, this lady Shamama, she's come into my life. She's helping us here in London, and she's given me a set of Radha Krishna deities to worship. I'm so excited." And Prabhupada wrote back, "Return those deities immediately. She is trying to steal you from me." And that's really what her plan was, because she was, pioneering in London, opening temples for her own, little group. Even one in Leicester, and she also opened one in East Africa. And so Prabhupada said, "Be patient." This is what she read when she received this aerogram from Prabhupada. "Be patient, because your desire to worship Radha Krishna will happen in good time." So she actually returned those deities. She would also do the arti in such a way, she would use camphor, big cubes of camphor, and light the camphor. You're supposed to have a ghee lamp and a camphor lamp, and different articles. And this camphor used to give off so much black smoke, and it would hover in the air for a little while and start gently landing on all of us. And we all thought this was part of a purificatory process of the arti ceremony. But, anyway, she could understand that Prabhupada knew her heart, that this is what she wanted to do, is worship Radha Krishna. And of course, you all know the story how those Radha Krishna deities, some or another, manifested themselves in this Hindu temple in the East End of London. And because there was a slight imperfection, because during the transit, because they came by ship, those Radha Krishna deities, which were going to be installed in that Hindu temple, because they were slightly damaged, and Prabhupada was invited to visit the temple authorities because they wanted us to have a program sometime in the future. And it came up in the conversation while Prabhupada was sitting in the manager's office. He saw these two boxes lying by the side of his desk. And Prabhupada asked just, curiously, what's in those boxes? And so the gentleman said, well, there's actually a set of marble Radha Krishna deities. But he said, our Pandit refuses to continue with the Pran Pratishtha ceremony, the life-giving ceremony for these deities. We can't install them because there's some imperfection. And so then Prabhupada said, so you mean those deities are useless? And he said, yes, you can say so. We spent so much time and so much money in buying those deities from Jaipur and shipped over and so on. And then, at that time, Prabhupada was with 4 of his senior-most disciples, including Tamal Krishna. Tamal Krishna was there, Mukunda, Gurudas, and Shyam Sundar. So, without letting exactly the manager know what they were talking about, he had this quick conversation. He called his 4 disciples over and he said, so you think you could lift those boxes? Can I tell you? Confidentially, of course. And they were curious. Yeah, I think probably we could do that. He said, okay. So he said to the manager, he said, well, now we're going to leave. And my men are going to take those boxes with us. So he immediately told them, instructed them, go there, pick up the boxes and let's go out of here as quickly as possible. And the man was completely taken by surprise. He said, what are you doing? And then Prabhupada said, kind of offhand, oh, you just told me that they're useless, but I think we will find a use for them. Okay, we're going. And then they immediately left the office with these 2 boxes. And they had a white transit van waiting downstairs. And so Prabhupada said, immediately load them into the back of the van and drive off very quickly, in case the man comes running after us. Of course he didn't, but then they drove around a corner after a mile or so, and then Prabhupada looked and he said, yes, he said, it is all right to steal Krishna, just like Krishna. He's famous for stealing butter, but we will become famous for stealing Krishna. And he said, these are the deities that were meant to be worshipped by us. And of course, when they got back to the very place, Prabhupada had them taken out of the boxes and they were standing on Prabhupada's table in his room. And Jamuna came and she was like in total ecstasy. Of course, these deities later became known as Radha London Ishwar. And so it's very difficult to understand the mind of a pure devotee. But if you some other take shelter of his association, then so many wonderful things happen by the mercy of Krishna. So Jamuna was taught by Prabhupada how to dress the deities, how to make outfits for them. So she actually made the first couple of outfits for Radha Ishwara. And he taught her all the different mantras for bathing the deities and so on and so forth, because after all, these were the very first large Radha Krishna deities that were ever worshipped in ISKCON. So Jamuna was completely in love with those deities. And she would sing bhajans and kirtans, she'd lead the artis, she'd give class. In those days, we were going out on Harinam 9 hours a day, 6 days a week. We'd go out in 3 shifts from 9 till 12, 2 till 5, and 7 till 10. Of course, our Mangal Arti was a little later, because in those days we didn't know the significance of Brahma Muhurta. We hadn't heard that term before. So our arti was at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so Jamuna Samanother was able to do all her services very expertly, cooking and cleaning and sewing. And also Prabhupada taught her how to sing the verses from Bhagavad Gita. He would give her those special lessons. In fact, he saw Jamuna as his own daughter. That was their relationship. Jamuna was his own daughter. And we were always amazed at how much prasada she was able to cook. Of course, there wasn't so many devotees at that time, but we didn't really have much money. The main funds were coming from the sale of the record that was recorded on the Apple label. And so, of course, you can hear Jamuna's voice. And actually, Prabhupada made a comment that anyone who hears Jamuna singing will become a pure devotee, just by hearing her singing. And that's why, for the next 10,000 years, we'll be listening to Jamuna singing Govindam in our temples around the world. Because Prabhupada loved the purity of her voice. She also gave amazing classes, and she was incredibly meticulous when it came to anything to do with Prabhupada, with Prabhupada's paraphernalia. She kept a series of diaries at that time, and I was privy to, she would show me her books, but unfortunately when she went to India, some or another, those diaries in a big trunk were stolen, or they got misplaced or something. So, but there is a book which will be coming out, I don't know when exactly, but Dinatarani, who lived with Jamuna for many, many years, is in the process of having this book published. So I pray that everyone gets the opportunity to read those diaries, because then you can really understand the heart of Jamuna. Even when, actually Prabhupada made a comment, this is some years later in the 70s, that Jamuna, she took sannyas before her husband took sannyas. Just to let you know. Because she just wanted to absorb herself in devotional service. And of course, she moved away from her family, and she ended up living in Canada. And she was living in Sharanagati, that particular community, which is in quite a remote place. You know, I've heard devotees say that Sweden is very remote, but once you get up there, I can't think of anything more remote than Sharanagati. Has anyone been to that community? Visited or seen it?
Smita Krishna Swami goes there.
Yeah, in Venables Valley. It's a few hours outside of Vancouver, in a very, very remote place. And she keeps a dog, or she did at that time keep a dog. In fact, she asked Prabhupada, she said, is it possible I can keep a dog for safety reasons? And Prabhupada said yes. He said this. I actually gave her permission to keep that dog, called Gopi. Did you ever visit the universe? But anyway. And also, I'd like, of course, she supervised the carving of our deities in the Vrindavan temple in Jaipur. That means Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course also with suggestions from Bharadwaj. It was like a joint project, Bharadwaj and Jamuna. And Gauranitai, Krishna Balaram, Radha Shamsundar, Vishaka Lalita, they were all supervised by Jamuna. I also like to talk about a very wonderful god sister from Italy called Ali Krishna. Now Ali Krishna, her mother was quite a powerful lady. She was the personal secretary to Gianni Agnelli, and Agnelli was the owner of Fiat. He owned a majority of shares in the Fiat car company in Italy. So obviously, her mother was very qualified as a secretary, and they're from Turin in North Italy. And Ali Krishna was also extremely well educated. And I don't think many devotees knew her qualifications and her qualities, because when I started the temple in Rome, I got to the stage where I needed a translator. And my wife and I were in Italy just by ourselves, without any help, you can say. We didn't know anybody in Rome especially. We had kind of lost Somaka because Somaka had ended up in jail. So we were in Italy, living in a youth hostel. And I have to say my wife was extremely tolerant, because we didn't have a kitchen, so we'd end up basically living on a diet of mozzarella and bread. And fruit, obviously, too. But not much in the way of vegetables, because we just didn't have a kitchen. And so I was looking in the papers. I learned 2 Italian words, 2 very important words, affitasi and vendisi. So if you know Italian, affitasi means for rent, and vendisi means for sale. Because I was looking for a temple building. So I came across this one particular building, which was affitasi, it was for rent. And so I phoned up Bhagava, who happened to be the GDC for Italy. And it wasn't easy making phone calls in the early 70s to Paris. You see, he was in Paris, we were in Rome. It was almost like as difficult as making a phone call in India in the 1970s. So I phoned him up and I said, we've come this far. But now we need a translator, because we want to enter into contract with the owner of that particular building in Vienna Strata. And I said, can you send anybody who's got any spare time to help us just to translate? And he said, well, we have a book marathon going on here in Paris. They always had a book marathon going on in Paris, every time we called them. And he said, but there's one girl here, and she's really not very good at distributing books. I can probably, allow her to come for some time. So this was Ali Krishna, so he paid for her train fare, she came, I picked her up at the Roma Termini. And so I could understand very quickly that she was a really intelligent person. And I said, would you like to help me? We're in the process of trying to negotiate with the owner of this property. And the first thing she said, well, my suggestion is you go in normal clothes. I don't think they'll be impressed with your shaved head, your dhoti and kurta. This is not the proper way to make this contract happen. So she said, let's go to this market, and we went there, and it was a place where they sold, obviously, normal clothing, jackets and trousers and hats and shirts and so on and so forth. So she actually pointed to all the different types of clothing I should wear, because I hadn't worn karmic clothes since I joined in 1969. So this is 1973. So 4 years, I never had any normal clothing. And so she kind of put my wardrobe together, you can say. And she said, I think you should also wear a hat when you go to see them, because we found out there was a lady who owned the property. And she said, so if she's, a little concerned, because she said, generally speaking, the etiquette is when you go to visit somebody in their home, you take off your hat. But I don't want you to do that. You keep your hat on, because I don't want her to see you have a bald head. And if she does insist, then the hat has to be taken off. Then you can tell her you were in a motorcycle accident, and you cut your head, and you had to go for an operation, and for that operation